What would you do if someone mocked your life's work 30,000 feet in the air with nowhere to escape? Steven Seagal settles into seat 2, a first-class Los Angeles to Tokyo 14 hours ahead. The leather creaks beneath him, not from weight, but from years of carrying stories no one sees anymore. He adjusts his reading glasses, opens a worn notebook filled with Aikido philosophy handwritten in Japanese. 20 years since his last film, the world has moved on, but the practice remains. The discipline endures. In 3, a Richard Brennan Hollywood talent agent, Armani suit sharp as his tongue. He notices Steven eyes narrow with recognition, then widen with opportunity. For entertainment, Richard leans to his companion loud enough for the cabin. Remember when action heroes were actually tough? Steven's pen pauses mid-stroke on the character for harmony bone. He continues writing. The flight attendant Maria, 20 years in the sky, recognizes something others miss: the way Steven's shoulders set not with tension, but with practiced calm, a mountain unmoved by wind. Richard orders champagne, voice pitched for performance. Make it 2 bottles. I'm celebrating real cinema, not that direct-to-DVD garbage that killed the industry. He glances at Steven, waiting for the reaction. Steven turns a page, the notebook, revealing old photographs tucked inside a dojo in Japan. Richard sees them, laughs sharper. Now still playing sensei. Still pretending you matter. The cabin grows quiet, other passengers shifting, uncomfortable but curious. The way crowds gather for accidents. What they don't see, what Richard can't know, is the letter beneath the photos. Embassy of Japan letterhead. Steven closes the notebook, stands with the grace of water finding its level. Excuse Mayhay moves past Richard, who mimics martial arts poses, making swoosh sounds. The champagne making him brave in the galley. Maria offers coffee. Her father was military, recognizes the bearing. You don't have to tolerate that, she says quietly. Steven accepts the cup. Sometimes tolerance is the lesson. Back in his seat, Steven opens the notebook again, but Richard isn't finished. The flight has just begun. Hey, sensei. Richard's voice cuts through the engine hum. Show us some moves. When Steven doesn't respond, Richard grows louder. What's wrong? CGI team on vacation? The notebook pages flutter from cabin pressure or memory, or both. In the margin, Steven's handwriting, small and precise. Today's practice remains centered. The plane climbs higher. Richard's voice with it. 14 hours of this performance ahead. What would you do? Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. This story unfolds from places unexpected. Steven touches the photos. Once more, a young man in white GI bowing to an older master, the master's face weathered by decades of teaching patience to those who came seeking power. Richard orders another drink. The flight map shows they're over the Pacific, now no landing for hours. Steven remembers this same route 40 years ago, a different man traveling, seeking something he couldn't name, finding something he couldn't leave. The plane shudders, light turbulence. Richard spills champagne, curses at the sky. Steven's hand steady, continues writing the character for respect. Lee, what Richard doesn't know, what the cabin doesn't see, is the small pin on Steven's jacket collar, barely visible unless you know what to look for. The Order of the Rising Sun, Japan's highest civilian honor for cultural contribution, awarded quietly 2 months ago. The ceremony unreported. Steven's request, true honor, needs no audience but the letter, thick paper. Official seal rests between photos of students across decades. Richard's performance continues, each joke louder, each gesture broader, playing to his captive audience. Some passengers laugh, nervous energy. Others look away, secondhand embarrassment. Maria passes again, catches Steven's eye, offers a slight nod, understanding without words. The flight tracker shows 3 hours elapsed, 11 to go, an eternity in the sky. Steven turns to a fresh page, begins sketching movement patterns. The philosophy of deflection. Not every attack requires a counter. Sometimes the greatest victory is letting opponents defeat themselves. Richard stands, champagne confidence approaches Steven's seat. The performance going mobile. Come on, tough guy, one little demonstration. Show us that famous Seagal intensity. Steven looks up, not with anger, not with fear, just focus. Him reading simple words, but Richard hears challenge where none exists. The cabin holds its breath, waiting for explosion, for the action hero to finally act instead. Steven returns to his book, the anticlimax, deflating Richard's performance, but shame and alcohol make dangerous fuel. Richard's face reddens, the jokes turn meaner. This is how it begins, not with thrown punches, but thrown words. The photos in the notebook flutter again, young faces frozen in time, each one a story, each one a life, changed by lessons learned in patient repetition. What would you do? When mockery meets meditation, when pride meets practice at 30,000 feet, the story has just begun. Richard's voice grows louder, each word a performance, each gesture grand for his captive audience. You know what killed your career? He sways, slightly champagne, working through him like poison through veins. Stephen's pen moves steady, writing the character for perseverance for not the bad acting. Richard continues, though God knows that was criminal enough. It was believing your own mythology, Master Seagal. He says it like a curse. The other first-class passengers shift in leather seats, some film Richard on their phones. Entertainment at altitude where civility thins like oxygen in pressurized spaces. Maria brings water, places it near Stephen. Her hand briefly touches the service cart handle, an old burn scar there from military service she knows about. Keeping composure under fire, Stephen notices, gives the slightest nod. Recognition between those who've been tested. Richard misses it all too deep in his performance, playing the role of big man, bringing down bigger. You were never real, never authentic. Just a white guy playing dress up. In Japan the words land, but don't penetrate. Stephen turns another page, reveals an old photo him at 25, skinny, serious, standing before a grave in Osaka. Rain. The gravestone bears the name Marita, his first teacher's father, who died protecting others. Richard can't see this, can only see what he needs to see, a fallen star to mock. Remember under siege? Richard laughs harsh. Even then you needed stunt doubles for the real work. A young passenger, maybe 16, traveling with his mother, watches uncomfortable. His hands fidget with a martial arts magazine. Bruce Lee on the cover. Heroes and legends. Stephen catches the boy's eye, offers the smallest smile. The boy looks away, embarrassed by association. This is what Richard does, not just mock the man, but poison the ideal, make heroism itself seem foolish. The plane hits turbulence, drinks spill. Richard stumbles, catches himself on Stephen's seat. Their eyes meet close enough to see Richard's are bloodshot. Stephen's are clear like still water, reflecting, nothing revealing, nothing, just depth. Move. Richard says thinks he's won something when Stephen shifts aside. The victory of the loud over the quiet, the aggressive over the dignified. But Maria sees different, sees how Stephen moved not away in fear, but aside with purpose, the way water moves around stones, not because it must, but because it chooses. Richard returns to his seat, orders another bottle. The flight attendants exchange glances. Protocol says serve him. Experience says this only goes one direction. Stephen opens a different section of his notebook. Newspaper clippings, yellowed with age headlines in Japanese, some in English. American helps stop Yakuza protection racket. Gaijin Aikidoka saves restaurant family. Dated 1978, when Stephen was nobody, just a young man studying in Osaka, working as a bouncer to pay for lessons. The clippings tell stories Richard would never believe because they weren't filmed, weren't marketed. Real violence, real consequences, real choices made in dark Osaka alleys where Stephen learned the difference between movie fighting and protecting others. The intercom crackles. Captain's voice, professional, we're experiencing some chop. Please remain seated. Richard ignores it, stands again. The champagne making him brave and stupid. He pulls out his phone, starts recording. Ladies and gentlemen, Steven Seagal. Fallen star won't even defend his own honor. Some martial artist, some master. The boy with the magazine looks at his mother, whispers something. She shushes him. Stephen heard the boy, asked why doesn't he fight back? Because Stephen thinks but doesn't say. Real strength serves. It doesn't perform, doesn't prove, doesn't need your belief to exist. His fingers find another photo tucked deeper in the notebook. A formal ceremony, Japanese dignitaries, Stephen in traditional hakama, receiving something precious. The photo's edge worn from touching, a private memory of public recognition. Richard's still filming, narrating his video. The death of an ego. Live at 30,000 feet. Other passengers join, some laughing, some just watching. The bystander effect in action. What they're really watching is themselves, their own willingness to let cruelty fly. Stephen writes another character, the one for teaching Jag, steady despite turbulence, both kinds, the physical and the spiritual, shaking the cabin. Maria passes again, this time with the captain. They pause near Richard, assessing the situation. Sir, the captain's voice firm, I need you seated. During turbulence, Richard waves him off. Almost done, just documenting history in the making. The captain looks at Stephen, apology in his eyes. Stephen gives the slightest shrug. Not your fault. This is the weight of being known. Every public space becomes a stage. Every cruel person becomes a critic. Every moment a chance for humiliation. But in the notebook between the clippings and photos lies something else. A letter from a student 20 years after training, now a police officer in Detroit. Sensei, Your teachings saved another life. Today, the patience you showed. When I was angry and young became the patience I showed a kid with a gun. This is the legacy Richard mocks. These are the lives he'll never know about. The plane shudders, hard drinks fly. Richard falls into the aisle. Stephen moves not to attack, but to steady the drunk man, mocking him for a moment. Richard feels it, the strength in those hands, the choice not to use it. He jerks away, embarrassed by the kindness more than he would be by violence. The notebook falls, photos scatter across the cabin floor. Memories spreading like water. Stephen kneels, gathering them, each image a story Richard can't read. The boy helps, hands shaking slightly, passes back a photo of young Stephen bowing. Their eyes meet. The boy sees something Richard missed, recognition dawning, but he says nothing, just returns to his seat, clutching his magazine. Differently now, the captain insists Richard sit the performance over for now, but 11 hours remain, and shame plus alcohol rarely leads to wisdom. Stephen settles back, notebook recovered. Most photos found, one still missing, the important one, the one that would explain everything if anyone cared to see. Maria spots it under a seat, retrieves it carefully, glances at the image. Her expression changes, quick intake of breath. She knows what this is, who these people are. She hands it back silently. Stephen tucks it away, their secret for now. The turbulence passes, but the atmosphere doesn't, charged with the energy of witnessed cruelty. What happens next when the powerful mock and the dignified endure at 30,000 feet? The story continues higher into the sky, where pressure reveals character. The cabin settles into uneasy quiet. Richard in his seat, planning next attack. Stephen closes his eyes, not sleeping, just centering the way masters taught. But Richard sees weakness where there's only wisdom, sees opportunity where there's only peace. He leans to his companion, a producer named Kyle, who's been silent until now. Watch this, Richard says. I'll show you how legends die. He stands again. Despite captain's warning, despite Maria's glare, despite common sense, the aisle becomes his stage, other passengers his audience, some already recording. Social media vulture. Steven Seagal, everyone. Richard announces loud, the man who killed action movies. Let's see those moves. Come on, sensei, show us the deadly Aikido master. He strikes a mock pose, hands chopping air, making sounds effects like a child playing. Other passengers laugh, nervous but complicit, the way crowds become when someone else leads. A businessman in 4B joins the mockery. I lost money on his last 3 films. A woman across the aisle adds her voice. My ex loved his movies. Should have been a red flag. The chorus grows, each person adding their small cruelty to the pile. Stephen remains still, a rock in the stream of their ridicule, unmoved but not untouched. The boy with the magazine shrinks in his seat, watching his hero become a punchline. This is how it happens, not all at once, but piece by piece. Dignity stripped in public. Richard grows bolder, feeds on the energy of mob mentality. At cruising altitude, he mimics Stephen's walk, exaggerated and slow, like an old man pretending it's strength. Remember when you fought Mike Tyson in that movie? Even fake fighting, you looked scared. The laughter spreads through first class into business, where phones capture everything. Stephen opens his notebook, writes a single word in English, this time compassion, for who the reader might wonder, the mocker or the mocked, or both. Maria approaches Richard. Professional but firm. Sir, you need to sit. This is your last warning. Richard waves her off. Just having fun, no harm done, right, Stephen? He says the name like spitting, makes it sound small and worthless. The captain emerges from the cockpit, his presence commanding, military bearing, obvious enough. He says simply, but Richard's too far gone, champagne courage flowing. You going to defend him? Captain, hero, another fake tough guy past his prime. The captain's jaw tightens, but he maintains control. Sir, sit down or we'll land early. Richard laughs. For what? Hurting feelings, making jokes. He turns back to Stephen. Come on, sensei. One little demonstration. Prove you're not completely fake. Stephen looks up, then meets Richard's eyes, not with anger, but with something deeper, pity. Richard sees it, and it enrages him more than any threat could have. You think you're better than everyone else with your fake wisdom, your pretend enlightenment. The whole cabin watches as Richard's performance turns darker, more personal. You read a fraud, a cultural appropriator, a white guy who thinks he understands the East. Each word meant to cut deeper, to find the wound that makes Stephen react. But Stephen writes another character, the one for peace. Steady hands on paper. The boy suddenly stands, voice cracking. Leave him alone. He's not hurting anyone. Richard turns, delighted by new prey. Oh, look, Seagal has a fan. Must be nice living in fantasy where washed-up actors are still heroes. The boy's mother tries to pull him down, but he stands firm. Small fists clenched. He helps people. The boy says, real people, not like you. Richard laughs, cruel. What people name one person Steven Seagal ever helped the boy falters, doesn't have names, just belief, just hope. See, Kid Richard says triumphant your heroes. Just another Hollywood lie. This breaks something in the cabin's atmosphere. The fun turns sour, even for the watchers. Maria steps between them, protecting the boy from Richard's words, if not his influence. The captain grabs Richard's arm, firm, but not violent. Sit now or be restrained. Richard jerks away, but complies, temporarily defeated, not finished. He slumps in his seat, orders another drink, though Maria ignores him. The bar is closed. Steven reaches into his bag, pulls out something small, a carved wooden piece worn smooth by handling. He stands slowly, walks to the boy, kneels in the aisle. I level. This was given to me by my first teacher when I wanted to quit, when I felt worthless. The boy takes it carefully, like holding glass or dream. Sits. Called an omamori, a protection charm, not from others, but from losing yourself. The boy nods, understanding something beyond the words, beyond the moment. Steven returns to his seat, Richard watching through bloodshot eyes, planning something worse. The cabin divides, those who laughed now uncomfortable with their participation, those who stayed silent wondering if they should have spoken sooner or at all. Maria brings the boy a ginger ale, whispers something that makes him smile. The captain returns to the cockpit but signals his crew watch Richard close. Hours remain in this metal tube where cruelty and kindness battle for airspace. Steven writes again, different characters now, ones that spell a name long forgotten, the name of a student who became a teacher who saved lives. Richard would mock, but that's for later. For now, there's only the sound of engines and wounded pride. Richard stews in his leather seat, ego bruised by an old man's grace. Doesn't know yet what that wooden charm means, what story it carries, what proof it represents. The boy holds it tight. His mother asks questions he can't answer about faith in heroes. Steven continues writing page after page of philosophy, of practice, of how to remain human when others choose to be less. To be cruel. The flight tracker shows 8 hours remaining, 8 hours for Richard to prove himself right or wrong. The story deepens like the sky outside, where stars watch everything and nothing. What happens when mockery meets immovable patience? When cruelty thinks it's found weakness, but finds instead something it can't understand, can't break, can't diminish. The wooden charm catches overhead, light, a small thing, carrying large meaning. Richard sees it, sees the boy's reverence, sees his own failure to break the moment, and grows angrier. Still, the performance isn't over. The cruelty not spent, the altitude making everything worse or better, depending on who you choose to. Beta hours drag on. Richard's anger fermenting like wine turned vinegar. In pressurized air, he watches Steven write page after page, each word a mockery of his mockery. The boy clutches the charm. His mother googles Steven Seagal, Real martial arts, finding old articles. Richard sees this too, his face darkening. The spotlight shifted away from his performance. He stands again, unsteady but determined. The captain's warnings forgotten or ignored. Kyle tries to stop him. Richard, enough, but Richard shakes him off. Not nearly enough. He approaches Steven's seat, slow, deliberate steps, like a predator who's forgotten he's prey. Still writing poetry, still playing the sage, still pretending you matter. Steven doesn't look up, pen moving, steady, recording thoughts older than Richard's rage. You know what you are. Richard leans close, breath sour with champagne and disappointment. Everything wrong with Hollywood, fake tough guys who believe their scripts. The cabin holds its breath, waiting for explosion, for the action hero to finally snap. But Steven writes another word, endurance, in careful letters. This infuriates Richard more than any punch could. The refusal to engage, the denial of drama. He grabs for the notebook, quick, drunk motion to tear away the last dignity. Steven's hand moves, not striking, just protecting the pages beneath. Their hands meet for a moment. Richard feels the strength, coiled and contained. He jerks back, as if burned by the contact with actual power. Maria arrives quickly, security training, showing, positions herself between the men. Sir, final warning, return to your seat, or we will restrain you for everyone's safety. Richard laughs, bitter. Restrain me for what? For truth-telling, for showing everyone what Steven Seagal really is. Nothing. The word hangs in recycled air, heavy with meaning. Richard doesn't grasp, nothing to prove, nothing to defend, nothing but presence and practiced peace. The businessman from 4B shifts, uncomfortable, his earlier mockery tasting different now. The woman who laughed looks at her phone, deletes the video. She was recording something, changing in the cabin's mood. The cruel fun souring into shame. Richard feels it, the shift in current, his audience abandoning him. He grows desperate, more theatrical. Look at him, just sitting there, probably can't even stand. Without help, probably needs stunt doubles to walk. He reaches out to push Steven's shoulder to force some reaction. Any reaction. Steven moves minimal, just enough. The push finds air. Richard stumbles forward, not thrown, not struck, just absent from where force went. Richard catches himself on the next seat, face flushed with effort and embarrassment. The boy watches, learning something about power and its application. Real strength doesn't need to hurt others to prove itself. Richard straightens, tries to salvage his dissolved dignity with more words. Typical Seagal, won't even fight. When challenged, cowards moves, but the words fall flat, even to him. The audience gone, the performance dying. He turns to Kyle. Can you believe this guy, this fraud? Kyle looks away, studying the window where clouds pass like judgment. Richard stands alone in the aisle, a man who started a war with shadows and lost. Steven closes his notebook, stands slowly, full height, full presence. Richard steps back, involuntary, something primal, recognizing danger, but Steven simply walks past him to the bathroom, leaving Richard standing alone in the aisle, alone in his anger, alone in the story he created. The captain emerges again, 2 flight attendants with him. Now official protocol, sir. We're done. You'll be seated and restrained for the flight's duration. Richard protests, but it's hollow. The fight gone, the champagne flat. They guide him to his seat, secure his hands with plastic restraints, not violent, just necessary. The consequences of choosing cruelty. Kyle pretends sleep. The businessman works. The woman reads, everyone avoiding eyes. The boy's mother whispers questions about the charm, about its meaning. The boy doesn't know, but holds it tighter. A tangible reminder that heroes exist even when mocked, even when fallen, even when the world says otherwise. Maria brings water to Richard's seat, professional despite personal disgust. He refuses. It's sullen. Now the spotlight he craved burning different. Steven returns, settles back, opens his notebook to fresh pages, writes simply, today I met a young man with courage, not about Richard, but the boy who stood when others stayed seated. The flight tracker shows 6 hours left, an eternity for Richard's shame, for Steven's patience, for the boy's faith, for the cabin's collective discomfort. What breaks inside when cruelty fails, when mockery finds only mirror? Richard stares forward, wrists bound by his choices, more than plastic. His performance over his audience dispersed, his victory transformed into visible defeat. But something else breaks too in the quiet, after the assumption that silence means weakness, that dignity bends to loudness, that patience equals absence of power. Steven writes on recording, not the insults, but the insights they accidentally revealed, about fear disguised as confidence, about pain seeking company in others, about how we choose to use our stages when life gives us captive audiences. The boy reads his martial arts magazine, different now, stories meaning more about training, about discipline, about becoming who you choose, not who others say you are, not who mockery makes you seem, but who you are in the quiet hours when no one watches, when cameras stop. The charm in his pocket warm from holding a teacher's gift to unknown student, passed from hand to searching hand, across the years, across the pain of public mockery, private dignity, and the choice between them. Maria dims the light, service ending, the cabin settling into troubled sleep, but some stay wakeful, processing what they witnessed, what they participated in, what they learned about themselves, when someone else became the target of collective cruelty and one man's refusal to be reduced to their expectations of violence. Richard sleeps, fitfully restrained and diminished, dreaming perhaps of different choices, while Steven writes by reading light, the same patience that built dojos, that taught students, that saved lives, that earned honors never mentioned, until someone finds the right questions, the right moment to see answers hidden in plain sight. Maria can't stop thinking about the photo she glimpsed when she retrieved it from beneath the seat. Something official, something important, something that changes everything about tonight. She moves through the cabin, checking on passengers, but her eyes return to Steven's seat, where he writes, still patient as mountains, while Richard sleeps restrained and snoring. The boy sleeps, 2 hand in pocket, holding the charm, like drowning men hold rope. His mother stays awake, reading her phone, article after article about Steven Seagal, not the movies, not the mockery, but something else buried in old news. Maria makes her choice, approaches the mother quietly, professional. May I sit a moment? The woman nods, grateful for company in the strange aftermath of public cruelty. Your son was brave, Maria says, soft, standing up like that when grown men stayed silent. The mother smiles, tired. He believes in heroes, even when the world tells him not to. Maria glances at Steven writing by window light. Do you know about the embassy letter? The mother looks confused. What letter? Maria leans closer, drops her voice. Saw something when I helped gather his scattered photos, something remarkable, she tells what she glimpsed official. Seal's government letterhead words like cultural treasure, the mother's eyes widen. She returns to her phone, searching different terms, finding different stories, not Hollywood gossip, but State Department records, embassy announcements, cultural exchanges there. Buried deep past entertainment, news past the easy mockery, real recognition. Maria leaves her searching, returns to the galley where the captain waits, coffee in hand. How's our problem passenger? He asks, meaning Richard's still sleeping it off, she responds, but there's something else, she tells him quietly about the photo, about what it might mean. The captain listens, his expression changing from tired to alert to something like, oh, I seen that before. He says slowly, that type of document, that level of honor. My father received one for military service. They don't give those to movie stars. They give them to people who change lives, who build bridges between nations. Maria nods. That's what I thought. Should we say something, do something? The captain considers. Looks towards Stephen, still writing peacefully, unaware of their discovery. No, he decides, a man who keeps that hidden in notebooks doesn't want public vindication, wants something else, something quieter. But maybe, the captain adds, we make sure our crew knows the real story, the truth beneath the public persona. Richard attacked, words spread subtle through service channels, flight attendants passing, professional whispers, each one glancing at Stephen differently, seeing not celebrity, but something rarer. Kyle wakes confused, Richard still restrained beside him, the night's events blurry. He checks his phone, sees the videos already viral, already spreading. Steven Seagal mocked on flight, won't defend himself, the headlines scream, but something feels wrong about the narrative, like watching a play missing the first act. The boy wakes, too, checks his pocket, the charm still there, still real. His mother shows him her phone screen, articles she found about dojos in Japan, about American students becoming teachers, about cultural programs spanning decades. The boy reads, hungry for validation, for proof his faith wasn't misplaced. Each article adds another layer to the man Richard tried to tear down. Maria brings breakfast early, but welcome, serves Stephen first. With particular care, he thanks her, simple, no acknowledgement of her discovery, of her knowledge, but she sees him notice her father's burn scar again and asks, quiet military family. She nods, surprised. He remembered from hours ago, one small detail, Navy corpsman. She answers, served in Desert Storm, never talked about it. Stephen nods, understanding, some stories stay private, some honors need no public stage like yours. She doesn't say, but thinks loud as she serves others. The cabin lightens with dawn somewhere. Time zones making morning arbitrary. Richard stirs, angry wrists sore from fighting restraints and champagne dreams. He sees Stephen writing still, or again, the notebook, endless. The patience inhuman. Kyle tries conversation. Richard ignores him, focused on his enemy, who won't be won. The captain announces descent beginning soon. Tokyo approaching, journey ending, but something unfinished hangs in the air, like pressure needing release or revelation. The boy's mother decides, shows Maria her phone. Look what I found about that charm, about protection ceremonies, about teacher traditions, about passing wisdom through wooden tokens, each charm unique, carved by the giver, blessed in ceremonies few witness. Stephen gave the boy not just wood, but lineage, connection to something ancient. Maria shares this with other crew, the story spreading like dawn light through the cabin, where people wake to different understanding of the night's events. Richard remains ignorant, locked in his anger, his narrative unchanged by shifting context. He doesn't see the crew's new deference, the passengers' changed faces, the boy's growing pride, doesn't know what photo lies hidden in Stephen's notebook, what honor unmentioned. The descent continues, pressure changing, years popping, truths emerging. Kyle scrolls his phone, watching videos of Richard's performance with morning clarity, sees himself laughing, supporting the mockery, enabling the cruelty through silent consent. He looks at Richard, still his client, still his meal ticket, but different now, smaller, somehow diminished, not by Stephen's actions, but his own. The notebook closes. Stephen stretches, first movement in hours. The boy watches everything about him, trying to memorize what matters, not the movies, not the fame, but the quietness that holds firm when tested by public humiliation, by champagne cruelty, by altitude mockery. His mother leans close, shows him an article about the Order of the Rising Sun, Japan's highest honor for cultural bridge building, for dedication beyond entertainment or profit. The boy's eyes widen, understanding dawning, why Stephen said nothing about his achievements, because real honor doesn't need defending, doesn't need proving, doesn't need audience, just needs to exist in quiet actions, in Patient teaching and wooden charms passed hand to hand through the years from those who know to those still learning what strength looks like when it chooses silence, when it chooses peace over easy victory. Tokyo grows larger through oval windows. City lights spreading like electronic stars. 20 minutes to landing. The captain announces, "Please prepare for final descent." Richard shifts restless wrists, still bound, his grand performance reduced to this. Stephen packs his notebook, careful with photos, each one returned to proper place. The boy watches every movement, trying to learn through observation how dignity moves, how patience packs, how strength prepares for arrival. Maria approaches Richard, professional despite distaste, will remove restraints for deplaning, but any aggression, any disturbance, and police will meet you at the gate. Richard nods, sullen, the fight gone out, replaced by something harder to carry. Kyle distances himself, choosing different row for landing preparations. Abandoning ship, the cabin fills with landing rituals, seats upright, tables stowed, but tension remains from the night's drama, everyone wondering about the ending. Stephen helps an elderly woman with overhead luggage, natural kindness. Richard sees this, rolls his eyes, still performing for no audience. The boy's mother shows one more article to her son. Recent news about a youth center in Osaka built with private funds, anonymous donor, but the architecture matches perfectly a sketch she found in background. Photos of Stephen's notebook years ago when he talked about giving back, the pieces forming a different picture than Hollywood painted. Then Richard mocked. The plane descends through cloud layers, each one revealing more city below. Maria removes restraints. Richard rubs wrists, dramatic about pain that's mostly pride. Stands slowly, no sudden movements, walk directly to your seat. He complies, bitter. The great mocker reduced to following simple instructions. Stephen stands too, helping others with their bags. Without being asked, a young mother with crying baby, struggling with carrier, finds gentle assistance. An old man with walking cane discovers steady arm, guiding to aisle. Small acts unnoticed by Richard, who sees only his own embarrassment. The wheels touchdown smooth despite weather, professional landing after turbulent flight. Applause ripples through the cabin for pilot skill, for journey's end, but also perhaps for surviving witness to public cruelty and private grace. The plane taxis toward the gate, everyone gathering possessions and thoughts. Richard pushes forward, wanting off first, needing escape from scene of shame. Kyle lets him pass, no longer willing to be associated with last night's choices. The boy clutches his magazine and charm. Two different proofs of heroism's existence. His mother takes photos of the articles she discovered, evidence for later when the world tries to tell her son that mockery wins, that cruelty prevails. Stephen waits, patient, letting others exit, no rush to leave, no need to flee. Maria catches him before he goes. "Thank you," she says simply, "for what?" He asks, genuine. "I did nothing worth thanking." "Exactly." She smiles, knowing that's what made the difference. The boy approaches, shy, charm in hand. "Should I keep this or give it back?" "Keep it," Stephen says, warm, but more important, share what it taught, that strength serves rather than dominates, that power protects rather than destroys. The boy nods, solemn, understanding the weight of carrying forward lessons learned. High Richard pushes through jetway, aggressive, needing distance from his failure, but the gate area holds surprise, a gathering crowd. Not for him, Japanese officials in formal dress, waiting with flowers, with photographers, with signs reading "Welcome Home." Cultural ambassador in perfect English. Richard stops, confused. This can't be for washed-up actors, for has-beens, but the lead official moves past him, approaches someone behind in line. Stephen emerges, sees the committee, his expression shifts, subtle discomfort. He wanted quiet arrival, not public display, but honors sometimes choose their moment. The official bows deep, speaks in English for the crowd, for the cameras. Master Seagal, on behalf of the Cultural Ministry, "Welcome home, Marie, here to escort to tomorrow's ceremony where your students wait to celebrate 25 years of bridge building, of teaching our ways to the world." Richard stands frozen, processing the words, the implications, the complete reversal. "This can't be real," he mutters, but cameras flash, recording truth. Stephen accepts flowers with gracious discomfort, asking quietly, "Was this necessary?" The official smiles. "Your students insisted." 300 gathered to honor their teacher from across Japan and 7 countries flying here to show gratitude. The boy and mother exit behind, witnessing the revelation of hidden honor. The boy holds his charm higher, now understanding its true value, not movie memorabilia, but teacher's gift, carrying weight of real tradition. Other passengers pause, recording the moment, different story than last night's mockery. Kyle watches his client's face as understanding dawns, terrible Incomplete Richard mocked not just an actor, but cultural bridge official treasure. The videos viral by Morning Light will show different story than intended, not brave truth teller exposing fraud, but drunk fool attacking dignity. Stephen tries to minimize the public display, guiding officials toward private areas, but damage done. Truth revealed the man Richard abused stands honored by government officials, by gathered students, by recognition earned through decades service. Maria passes by nods satisfaction at justice served without violence. The captain too tips his hat to Stephen's patience, now vindicated, but Stephen looks uncomfortable with vindication, this public proof of private worth. He didn't need the world to know, didn't need Richard to be proven wrong. The practice itself was always enough, the teaching sufficient, the patience complete, but sometimes universe provides its own justice, its own timing for truth's emergence. Richard stumbles away toward baggage claim, each step heavier than restrained. Hours behind him, crowds gather around the man he spent hours trying to diminish. The boy asks mother, can we watch the ceremony tomorrow? Can we see? She nods, yes, already searching for public details of private honor. Stephen glances back, catches the boy's eye, slight smile, and nod, teacher to student, across the distance, across the cultures, across the mockery. Connection holds, the charm weighs warm in young pocket, carrying forward what matters most, not the vindication, not the cameras, not the officials with their flowers, but the simple truth that dignity holds when tested by altitude, cruelty that patience serves when challenged by champagne, courage and public stages. The gate area clears, Richard long gone, his shame private, his lesson public, while Stephen walks surrounded, but alone, still the same man who wrote quiet through hours of abuse, through public mockery, through tests designed to break composure, but found instead only more proof that true strength never needs proving. The ceremony hall fills with hundreds gathering, former students arriving from distant places. Stephen stands backstage, uncomfortable with pageantry, preferring quiet dojos to public stages, but his students insisted. 25 years demands recognition and gratitude properly expressed. The boy sits front row, his mother beside him, special guests invited after yesterday's courage. He wears his best clothes, the charm safe in his pocket, close to his heart. Maria enters too off duty now, but needing to witness the story's completion. She finds a seat near the captain, who also came in civilian clothes, both understanding they saw something rare on that flight worth following through. The cultural minister takes the podium, speaks of bridges between nations, of one man's dedication to teaching peace through warrior ways. Strange paradox made real, he tells statistics, 300 dojos across 40 countries, thousands of students, but numbers can't capture the lives changed, the violence prevented, the peace taught. In the audience, an older man rises, asks permission to share his story. 20 years ago, I held a knife ready to end another man's life, but my teacher's voice echoed in my head, his patient lessons about choosing differently. Today, that man is my business partner, my daughter's godfather, my friend. He bows toward stage where Stephen stands. This is what you taught, this is your legacy. Another rises, a woman in uniform, police chief. Now, once angry teenager, you showed me strength wasn't hitting, but holding back when hitting seemed easier. My city is safer because you taught patience to one angry girl who became protector. Story after story, students rising, each one testament to quiet teaching. The boy listens, eyes wide with wonder. These aren't movie tales, but real transformation. The young teacher stands, holds up wooden charms similar to boys, but worn with age. This saved my life, not from attackers, but from myself, from my own darkness. When I wanted quit, when I felt worthless, I held this reminder that teachers believe. Now I teach others, pass forward the gift of discipline and hope you gave freely. The minister returns, calls Stephen forward for formal recognition, long overdue, but first a surprise. The main doors open. Richard enters slowly, escorted by officials, his face pale, without champagne, courage, without audience approval, just a man who received a call this morning early from the ministry, strongly suggesting attendance to witness what he tried to destroy, to see the truth. He couldn't recognize Stephen, sees him, no satisfaction, showing no vindication. Claimed just quiet acknowledgement. Richard finds a seat, back row corner, trying to disappear from his own actions. The ceremony continues, the minister producing an ornate wooden box, ancient and precious. Inside rests a scroll hand calligraphed with official proclamations and government seals, but more important, a second item wrapped in silk, handled with reverence, the Order of the Rising Sun, Japan's highest honor for foreign nationals who build bridges. Stephen accepts reluctantly this public Recognition of private service never done for awards. He speaks briefly, voice soft, but clear honors belong to my teachers who showed a young man angry and lost that strength serves rather than dominates, that power protects the vulnerable, not proves superiority over others. His eyes find Richard brief connection, made no anger there, just understanding. We all face choices in small moments to build up or tear down a mock what seems different or seek to understand to use our platforms for cruelty or kindness. Richard shifts uncomfortable, the words hitting their intended target. Without naming names, the boy watches rapt as his hero speaks not movie dialogue, but earned wisdom about failure and recovery, about ego and humility, about choosing daily who we become. Maria wipes her eyes, moved by simplicity of profound truth spoken plainly. The captain nods approval, military bearing, recognizing another warrior's path different but parallel. Stephen concludes quickly, uncomfortable with spotlight, but says one more thing, looking at the boy. True strength appears in unexpected moments from unexpected people who choose courage when mockery seems easier, when silence seems safer, when standing up costs something real. The boy touches his charm, understanding the weight of being seen and acknowledged. The ceremony shifts to demonstration phase. Senior students showing technical mastery but really showing philosophical understanding of controlled power, of purposeful restraint, each movement precise, not for destruction but for protection, for preservation. Richard watches silent, seeing what he missed on the airplane in his performance, that every person here chose different path, than easy violence, than simple revenge. When they had power, they chose service. When they had skill, they chose teaching. The demonstrations and students bow deep to their teacher, to the tradition. Stephen returns the bow lower. Than there's humility in victory, grace in recognition. The minister speaks again about tomorrow's opening of new youth center, anonymous funding, but everyone knows, looking at Stephen, where resources came from. Movie residuals turned into dojos, turned into hope for angry young people, like he once was. The boy's mother leans, whispers to her son, this is why heroes matter, not for their perfection, but their choices when tested by public cruelty. The ceremony concludes, people rising to leave, but movement slows near Richard's row. He sits frozen, unable to move, the weight of witness pinning him down. What does a mocker do when mockery turns into mirror, showing his own smallness? Stephen approaches him, quiet footsteps on polished floor, stopping close. Richard looks up, expecting judgment, expecting the revenge he would have taken. Instead, Stephen offers a simple nod, man-to-man acknowledgement without words, that everyone fails, everyone falls, but everyone chooses what comes next. He turns to leave, but pauses once, speaks soft enough only Richard hears. The flight is over, the landing complete. What happens now is your choice. Richard sits alone as hall empties, the boy passing close, still clutching charm. Their eyes meet, boy to broken man, one rising up, one fallen down, but both still choosing in each moment who they become, what legacy they leave. The lights dim on empty chairs, on concluded ceremony, on revealed truth, but light grows in other places, in young hearts, in changed minds, in the understanding that dignity tested becomes dignity, proved not through force but through patience of teachers teaching. Long after spotlights fade, long after cameras leave, in quiet dojos, in small moments where true strength builds its home. 3 days pass since the ceremony, life returning to its normal rhythms. Stephen visits the youth center before its public opening, walking through spaces built from movie money, not for glory, not for recognition, but for the kids who need somewhere safe to learn what he learned, that strength can serve, that power can protect, that anger can transform. The boy arrives early with his mother clutching a letter he wrote last night, about the flight, about the mockery, about finding courage in wooden charms. He hands it shy to Stephen, reading each word, careful each line. True, thank you for showing that heroes don't need to throw punches to prove their worth. Stephen folds the letter, places it carefully in his jacket pocket, near his heart. Your standing up took more courage than any movie fight. Remember that. The mother adds quietly, he's been different since that night, more confident, not aggressive, confident, but assured somehow that good exists worth defending. Maria arrives, unexpected day off from flying, bringing coffee and recognition. My father would have liked seeing what happened, how you handled public cruelty with the patience he showed me when I was angry, about his scars, about his silence, about his refusal to share war stories I thought were glory. Now I understand some strength show by not showing, by just being. The captain joins them, also off duty, also Drawn back to witness aftermath in the military, we call it bearing under fire. You showed textbook example, but more than that, you showed the boy and all of us alternative responses to provocation designed to create violence, to justify mockery, to prove points about who deserves respect and who doesn't based on surface reading of complex lives. They walk the center, seeing spaces designed for transformation work, for second chances, a meditation room, a training hall, a study space, a quiet garden, each areas serving different aspects of the journey from anger to peace. The boy asks permission to see the dojo, where classes will happen, where teaching continues. Stephen leads him to the training space, mirrors and mats waiting for students. This is where the real work happens, not the techniques, but the changing of how we see our own power, our own choices, our own responses. When the world pushes, expecting us to push back, proving we're strong through showing force, but real strength chooses differently, responds unexpectedly with patience, not power. The boy nods, understanding beyond his years, earned through witnessing public demonstration of these principles at 30,000 feet, where thin air revealed true character. Kyle enters hesitant, having tracked down the center's opening through news reports. He approaches careful, not sure of welcome. After enabling Richard's performance, I need to apologize for laughing along, for not stopping what I knew was wrong. Stephen accepts, simply no long speeches about forgiveness, just acknowledgement. We all have moments where we choose poorly. What matters is what we do next. Kyle nods, grateful for the simplicity of redemption offered without conditions. He mentions Richard alone in hotel room, refusing all calls, drowning in shame and something worse. The video's viral now, but not as intended. Public humiliation, reversed comments pouring in about the ceremony, about the revelation of who was mocked. Stephen shows no pleasure in this reversal, just quiet sadness for pain created by need to tear down what seems threatening, what seems different, what seems false. It was actually decades of service, patient bridge building between cultures. The center's director arrives, an old student, now administrator of Hope Institutionalized Sensei. She says everything's ready for tomorrow's opening. 300 enrolled, already waiting list for the classes. Parents desperate for alternative paths for their angry children, their lost teenagers, their young adults, seeking direction without violence, without domination, without the poison of might makes right. The boy asks, quiet, can I volunteer, help somehow be part of this? His mother starts to object about school commitments, about distance traveled, about practical concerns, but sees his face, the determination there, the need to continue what started. High-end pressurized cabin, where he stood alone against crowd mockery, finding his courage. Of course, Stephen says courage like yours should be nurtured, should be shared. The boy beams, bright first real smile since the flight, since the testing. They discuss details, weekend visits, summer programs, ways to stay connected to the lesson learned that standing up doesn't mean standing against, but standing for something worth protecting, worth demonstrating, worth passing forward to others. Searching, Maria mentions her routes, often through Tokyo, offers coordination help for visit planning. The captain adds, his daughter teaches, could use example of young courage. A network forming around the boy, supporting his journey from witness to participant in the quiet revolution of choosing peace when war seems easier, more satisfying. The director shows them the memorial wall, where photos hang of every student who went from anger to teaching others. The multiplication effect of patient mentoring. Richard's not there, but his absence noted in the space left for future possibilities for redemption earned through change behavior, not public apology, but private transformation. The tour concludes in the garden space, where cherry trees wait for spring. Stephen sits quiet on simple bench, the others joining in comfortable silence. No need for words, after all spoken through actions chosen, through dignity, maintained through mockery, endured, without breaking character, without abandoning principles, without proving points that didn't need proving to anyone watching. With eyes clear enough to see past surface, the boy holds his charm, but differently now, not as talisman, but as reminder of the moment he chose to stand, when sitting seemed safer, when silence seemed smarter. But something inside said speak up, said defend beauty, said protect dignity from those who destroy what they don't understand, what threatens their worldview, what challenges assumptions about who deserves respect and who deserves mockery based on job titles or perceived failures. The sun sets slow through garden windows, painting the space in golden light. Tomorrow hundreds come seeking what Stephen teaches, not movie moves, but life, philosophy written in notebooks during long flights, while enduring mockery from those who see only fallen Star not risen teacher only has been actor not active transformer of young lives directed away from violence, towards service strength, toward protective power, the legacy revealed not in ceremonies, but in changed hearts in stood-up moments when courage costs but pays dividends in dignity, maintained in peace, preserved 1 year later, same flight path Los Angeles to Tokyo, different passengers, the boy sits alone now 16, and traveling to summer intensive at the center his mother trusts him with. Solo journey, the wooden charm worn smooth from daily touching, he reads philosophy, Stephen recommended about warrior poets who chose peace when violence seemed easier, when revenge called louder, when ego demanded satisfaction through force and first. Class A businessman complains loudly about service, about perceived slights. The flight attendant new to the route maintains composure barely under his assault. The boy watches, remembering another flight, another bully, another test. He stands quiet, approaches. The scene, excuse me sir, voice steady. The businessman turns, ready to expand his circle of targets to include youth, but the boy speaks first. She's doing her job in difficult conditions. Perhaps patience helps. The man sputters, who asked you mind your business? Sit down, kid. But the boy stays standing, not aggressive, not confrontational, just present. I saw someone once handle disrespect with such grace, it changed my life. The businessman pauses, something in the tone, the quiet confidence unusual in teenagers. The boy continues, he taught me strength isn't about winning, but about choosing who we become in difficult moments. When easy cruelty tempts us, all other passengers listen, the atmosphere shifting from entertainment to education. The businessman deflates, slightly shamed by youth, showing elder wisdom. He sits quieter, orders coffee normally. This time no performance. The flight attendant touches boy's shoulder, brief gratitude for intervention done gently. He returns to seat, opens his journal. Writes about the moment, about cycles continuing, about lessons passed from teacher to student, from witnessed dignity to practiced grace. Halfway through flight, he receives message on the plane's Wi-Fi from Stephen, simple, heard about your acceptance to advanced program, proud of your progress. Keep practicing, patience. The boy smiles, types back, careful today. I stood like you taught, not with fists, but with presence, not for glory, but for good. Stephen responds quickly, despite time difference. That's the way real strength spreads, one moment, creating another moment, creating endless ripples of chosen dignity. The boy saves the exchange, adds to collection of correspondence gathered over the year, each one teaching through simple examples how to live with purposeful peace. He thinks of Richard, who disappeared completely from public life after the ceremony. Some say he teaches anger management, now having learned hard way where mockery leads. Others say he volunteers at youth centers, having seen the damage words can create. No one knows certain, but the boy hopes everyone deserves redemption if they choose it. The plane continues through familiar sky, where once dignity was tested hard and passed the test, not through violence, but through patience. Of practiced peace, the boy's journal fills with observations about human nature, about choices made in pressurized spaces, where true character shows itself clearly through action, taken or not taken, when provocation calls, when audience gathers, when cruelty performs. He writes about Maria, still flying routes, still carrying stories of that night, sharing with new crew the lesson learned about judging surface without knowing depth, about the captain who uses the example in training sessions, about maintaining composure under public pressure, under personal attack, under circumstances designed to break discipline. The flight continues peaceful, no drama unfolding, no tests presenting, just ordinary travel. But the boy knows every flight carries potential for choosing who we become, when challenged by others, when witnessed by many, when recorded by phones, when judged by strangers. He touches the charm, its weight familiar, its lesson embedded in muscle memory, of standing up by staying calm, of fighting back with peaceful presence, of honoring teachers by becoming one, by passing forward what was given free. The plane descends through morning clouds, Tokyo spreading below like electronic ocean. The boy packs careful journal and charm, philosophy books, an earned wisdom ready for summer of deeper training, not in combat, but in character, in the thousand ways we choose each day to build or destroy, to lift or mock, to see the surface or seek the depth, to assume the worst or discover the best. He thinks of Stephen, probably teaching now in quiet dojo, far from spotlight, where real work happens, where lives change, where anger transforms into protective strength, where young people learn what the boy learned that night in first class about true power, not The power to hurt, but power to heal, not the power to dominate, but power to lift the plain land smooth. New chapter beginning, old lessons continuing in new contexts. The boy disembarks with quiet confidence earned through witnessing and choosing. To stand when standing mattered, when silence seemed safer, when mockery ruled, until dignity responded not with fists, not with words, but with presence that changed everything. He walks through airport toward the center where hundreds gather to learn. The way of warriors who choose peace over violence, service over dominance, building over breaking, the charm in his pocket warm with purpose, connecting him to lineage of patient teachers who know that strength shows best in restraint, that power serves. When protecting others, that dignity maintained under public assault teaches louder than any speech about who we are when tested by altitude, by audience, by alcohol, courage, and who we choose to become after when the flight ends but the journey continues through. Quiet centers, through changed hearts, through young people learning ancient wisdom about strength that serves rather than destroys, about power that protects rather than proves, about dignity that stands when mockery attacks and responds with grace. That transforms worlds, one flight at a time, one student at a time, one choice at a time, one echo continuing forever outward from that night. When patience met cruelty at 30,000 feet and showed everyone watching what real strength looks like. In action or principled inaction, the boy enters the center where his journey deepens, where the echo strengthens, where the story lives, not ended, but continuing in every choice made to stand with dignity, when falling seems easier to speak with kindness. When cruelty calls louder, to teach through example, when words fail, power to be the echo of dignity witnessed, of strength demonstrated, of peace chosen again and again in pressurized moments, where character shows clear and choices matter most. The charter ends, but echoes remain in every student taught, in every bully transformed, in every witness changed by seeing dignity maintain its center when storms rage hardest at 30,000 feet or ground level. The lesson remains forever echoing. Forward. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe. But more important, live the lesson learned, that true strength serves, true power protects, and dignity maintained changes everything.